was late. Yeah, we're on the wrong morning. We didn't do it yet.
All right, if everybody can take their seats. We will call this joint meeting of the Suncoast Transit Authority and Hillsborough Regional Transit Authority to order. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for making the trip across the bridge. Last time we had the honor of visiting you in your environment, although I wasn't actually at your headquarters. We met in sort of halfway across the way. So thank you for coming. I'm thrilled to be able to have this opportunity again, and thrilled to be here with my counterpart friend from Tampa. Thank you, Terry Flores. We do have an agenda item for public comments. I don't have any cards. Are there any members of the public that would like to make comments? Not seeing any. We will move to the next item of business, which is the Executive Committee joint meeting from last time. Are there any corrections to those minutes? Second. Okay, we have a motion to approve. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed signify by saying no. They pass unanimously. The first discussion item is a follow-up on the joint executive committee meetings, and Mr. Miller will introduce that item.
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. I apologize, but the summary list of the suggested action items for our last meeting is being copied right now. So I'm sorry, it got sent out in the email version, but not in the printout version that's at your table. So Bob Lasher should be back any moment with that. So I would suggest maybe moving to the other two items.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you want to introduce the item B then? Since our last meeting, I think we've been really ramping up our coordination on our legislative agendas. The PSTA board met last week and approved our legislative agendas, which were included in your packet also, and then included the priority projects that we have these pictures of, these projects listed at your places. The Clearwater Beach to the Tampa International Express, Tampa Airport Express Bus Service, the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit down in St. Petersburg to the beach, and the Regional Fare Collection Project. And we have those three handouts in front of you. We have now scheduled, we have made reservations, or whatever they're called, on both the Hillsborough delegation and the Pinellas delegation legislative delegation meetings. I believe September 22nd and 24th of this month. The Pinellas one, I think, is first, and then the Hillsborough one. To jointly present our collective legislative items for essentially the transit priorities for the Tampa Bay. I think that would be a very positively received initiative to support regionalism amongst our delegations, and I'd be glad to get any feedback or suggestions on how we best position that. Do you want to any comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair. The HART Legislative Major Projects and Legislative Committee meet on August 17th. They came up with a draft agenda that comes to the full HART Board for consideration on September 14th, which puts us in a situation that we have a draft agenda that when the board votes to approve it on the 14th, we'll be working overtime to print our nice sheets because committees start that week. But we've been working with our local contact, which is Justin Day from the advocacy group. In addition to committing to do our delegation meetings together, we are lining up our meetings with our representatives. I met with Senator Brandis last week with Commissioner Merman via the phone, meeting with Dana Young's office this week, and I believe we're still lining up which of our board members are going together. and we're working on a joint meeting for Chairman Latvala, because at this point, he controls the destiny of what happens with funding for HART, but HART is not within there. However, if we go together, and we're talking regionally, we feel a lot more confident that we will be interesting. It's not like he isn't working on other things right now. We understand that his time is valuable, but we do want to try to get in there together. To Brad's previous conversation, for the items coming forward, we had discussed a strategy of how to be very supportive on the projects which are in Pinellas County, and also come out together for a regional project. So Brad, if I'm going out of my lane, stop me, but as I understand the BRT, Central Avenue BRT, the strategy is to push for a DOT program on that. And the HART committee voted to be very supportive of that. On the service from the airport out to Clearwater Beach, there are service planning grants associated with that. And again, my understanding is PSTA was looking for support to increase that grant funding, and we absolutely support that as well. Nicely, this leaves us with a project, which is a top priority for general funding at the legislature. So we're not up there asking for general funding for this and general funding for that and general funding elsewhere. On the HART side, we have been very successful working on a bunch of DOT pilot projects, and we have DOT intermodal funding locked up in the the revenue collection program. So HART is not looking for a separate DOT project at this time this year. We don't anticipate doing that in next session. So we're very, very happy to support the Pinellas initiative. And again, we'll go with the one unified request and the one unified ask for the fair technology to go forward to the general session. I probably missed some stuff, but there we go.
Now that you have the full packet, there is a calendar listed on page 19 of the packet that I presented to the PSTA board previously that I was mistaken. The Pinellas delegation meeting is on Tuesday, September 22nd, and the Hillsborough one is on Friday, September 25th. So with this committee's support, we would plan to schedule going to both Pinellas and Hillsborough together with this set of priorities and with whatever else the HART board ultimately recommend.
Terrific. Well, if I could say something, Chair, one of the great things is, and I think this is we've been birthing this baby for about 3 years now since I've been on the board, which is that showing as much regional cooperation as possible is very important for the legislature especially. We've tried to show that, and I think that our organizations have worked very well together in terms of trying to figure out what those regional priorities are. The regional fare collection is really, I think, the top priority for us all, because when you tie in fare collection on a regional basis with what you're talking about in terms of the Clearwater Tampa International Airport, it's a no-brainer. We need to find a way of being able to have the same fare card so that we don't have any kind of confusion for anyone that comes into Tampa and wants to either stay there or visit Pinellas or vice versa, so that they are it's a seamless process for them and that we're not going to have any issues or problems. I think it's important for both of us to recognize that, and we've been very fortunate that last year we both pushed for the regional fare card and we didn't get it, but there were a lot of projects, as you know, that got the axe. That just happened to be one of them, and thankfully we have a former legislator here who can tell us, that never happens in the legislature. Anything you ask for, you get. So I think that the plan to have us go before both delegations is extremely important. We make that commitment to be at your delegation, and we'll speak it in any way that you want so that we can talk about our priorities together and move forward.
I would just like to follow up and congratulate you on your messaging about and you too, Catherine.
Thank you.
About messaging everything as a region. We all know, I don't want to belabor anything, but that's one of Senator Latval's biggest gripes, that we have not been able to work collaboratively. And it didn't work when he tried to force it, but I think this is an incredible way to show by example that we can do it voluntarily and make it even more powerful. So thank you for your offer, and we're taking you up on it.
That's fine.
We'll do the same to you.
And one other point we have going on is we have currently posted our government relations job over at HART. This is the first time we've had that opportunity for the past, I think 5 years. So whoever is the resource for us will be leveraging these local positions and local issues. So if you have candidates in mind, please encourage them to apply, and we'll be reaching out to PSTA to make sure you guys, we're working together and we have somebody on the panel, because if we are pushing forward and this is the voice, you should know who you should be able to weigh in on who this voice is going to be. Again, it's a HART position, but we'll be able to allocate more resources to having more of a presence in Tallahassee, to paying a little more attention to these projects. So again, by the end of the week, this position will close. So anyone who thinks would be a good candidate, please encourage them to apply. GoHeart.org.
So, Brad,
Yeah.
do you think this might be a timely moment to introduce Alan to the HART people, just so that they have a face and he can kind of share with you maybe what he's doing on behalf of us?
Alan and Robert.
Alan and Robert. PSTA's Government Affairs team is back there. Alan Susky and Robert Stewart. Alan Susky with Alan Susky and Associates, and Robert Stewart with Gray Robinson. Maybe they might just want to say a few words on our legislative strategy, which was also included in your packet.
Yeah, Robert Stewart with Gray Robinson Law Firm. It's been our great privilege to work with for a number of years now. I'm excited to work alongside Alan together as we take that agenda forward. And I think the only thing I would say is I would commend your two organizations on your partnership and on your vision for working together for a better community here in the Bay Area. I think it's, as someone who hears a lot of talk about regionalism and working together across jurisdictional boundaries, it's nice to see it in action. So kudos to all of you for doing that.
I would just echo Robert's comments. I think that is the number one thing that this group has going forward in the legislature is not being parochial, not looking at one project over another, and that infighting that can occur not only amongst yourselves but within the delegation. The more you work together and show that unified front with the delegation, the more likely you are to get things funded over not just 1 year but over a series of years, and not have that strong red pen as governor till that at the end of the year. So I think this is a great step. We've been staying informed through Brad and Mr. Long and Nelson and Chair Garden and others. I think this is a great opportunity to move forward. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thank you. As long as we're introducing people, Ray Shimardi, the Executive Director of TBARTA, joined us. And I don't know if all of the HART board members know Alan Zimmett, who is our attorney on our side. And just for the record, we do have video conferencing set up for this meeting, so that will be streamed. So just for your information. And then I think I had Karen and Julie and Darwin.
And Mickey, too.
Mickey, okay. Why don't we go through this?
Yeah, I would just kind of like to understand how this looks like, because I think there are some areas that we can definitely work together on, and of course the big one that comes to mind is the regional fare box initiative, and I think that benefits not only our two agencies but several other agencies in the surrounding area. But my fear comes in where we might get into a position of having to approve a project that maybe we don't know enough of materials about. So are we using these joint sessions to go into the projects that we're both have knowledge and buy-in on, and then maybe having our separate asks, so jointly together at the delegation meetings, and then we'll each have our own then agenda from that point where they might diverge? Is that what we're looking at?
I mean, yeah, I think generally that is the case. Obviously, and I don't think necessarily the legislature expects Catherine or the HART to come and talk about the Central Avenue Bus Rapid Transit Project in St. Petersburg. I think the idea would be, like you're describing, that we would jointly support the regional fare collection project, maybe the services across the bay, like the Clearwater Beach to the airport service, and then if there was a similar HART kind of project that crossed over into Pinellas, and then it wouldn't be, at least my idea, not to sort of prioritize Hillsborough projects and Pinellas projects in Hillsborough, but just generally that we are supportive of each other's legislative agendas or priorities in a kind of global way on the other
Right.
projects.
Right, because I think that's where it could get muddied, is then,
Yeah.
after these 2 or 3, big initiatives, then, how do we go out prioritizing them after that point? So I guess I would like to see, us definitely coming together on those couple of projects where we do actually have a lot of interest and a lot of synergy we've been working together a lot on, and then, each agency then, present the rest of their agenda. So, okay, I'm all for that if that's...
Yes, ma'am. In fact, Monday, when we spoke with the senator, his first question was, where are you on your regional fair issues? He's very interested, obviously, and I see from a planning perspective in the data we get when we can track these serial numbers around the bay. So it's a good conversation about that data, but then we segued into first mile, last mile of what we're trying to do and accomplish with our solicitation that will go out in September, the value of the CNG rebate. So since we do have him in our district, we started off with our regional project, but then spoke more specifically about what were the HART-specific projects. And I presume that when Brad meets with them, the conversation will be similar, but going over into the other priorities that PSTA has.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, just to echo off of what you all were saying, too, I think what I heard a little while ago that I thought was really important was how you explained that we're not going after the same funding sources for different projects, that we're being coordinated about it. I think that is really where we're going to get best bang for our buck. Now, will that always be the case? Maybe not, but the fact that we're actually looking at that and talking about that is really important. And then segueing off of that, I was curious, in your legislative priorities, where does your MPO come in on your legislative priorities? Do they know what those projects are? Do they buy into those projects? Are they supportive of your legislative priorities? And I ask the question because I'm trying to find new ways to be working with our MPOs.
When we look at our MPO's list of priorities, because they have, it sounds horrible to say, there's so much pavement-focused stuff in the MPO.
Yeah, right.
When you start getting to the HART priorities, we're not usually in the top 10. You will see a lot of road expansion, road improvement, traffic signalization, bike and pedestrian. But where we have the opportunity to overlap, then we are on the MPO's list. They get our list of projects. It aligns with their TIP. It aligns with their annual UPWP. And Ray will know this much better than I. Some of the issues are things will pop up to us, first mile, last mile, something we're working on now. Usually to get into UPWP, you've got to be in there 2 years early, so we're sort of playing catch-up. So we split the equation of making sure we're lined up with the MPO, but preserving the ability to be dynamic and a little more responsive to what might be interesting to a legislator who wants to find a pilot program that we will volunteer to make sure we get that money, we can spend it to help out in our county. So being dynamic with that, but being consistent with the capital needs. So short version, they've got the fair, I understand they have the fair revenue there. I'm talking to them tomorrow about our TDP. So the update going on right now in light of Go Hillsborough, and then what we're doing with status quo funding. So we work really closely with them. But it might not be, is it their top 5 or our top 5?
I guess then my further question is do they, are you finding that they go after the same pots of money that you are?
No, actually, and Jeff, if I'm missing anything and you want to chime in on any point, Jeff Seward, our CFO, is back there, and he works very closely with DOT and also, to an extent, some MPO staff. We do not pursue the same projects that they do. They're typically, they'll do the studies for the programs, but we are much more operational, which is a shorter term usually than the MPO is looking at. So they'll be pursuing their longer studies, but we're working with them that when that study is resolved, for instance, the South County, the South Shore Circulator Program, they've done the preliminary planning draft, but then there's almost a handoff that when they've got that conducted and it comes time to put the service out there, then we will be pursuing it. They're supportive. So we're just keeping different lanes.
We were just in the situation this year that we were going after the Tiger Grant money they were going after the Tiger Grant money for a trail, and we were going out for the Tiger Grant money for our regional fair.
Well, and we find the same thing when on the Hillsborough side, before the Tiger Grant applicant, and Councilman's smiling because he's gone through this, we call the city and we call the county. We have far fewer municipalities, but we are trying to make sure that we are the only one that those electives are going to be able to support because we're the only Tiger app. That's a really good point. You know, it's not just coordination here.
Yeah.
There's so many places where this overlaps.
But you do that coordination.
We do. Okay. Thank you.
We go back, Chris, this time, okay,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I am such a big supporter of this strategy. I think that, in my experience in legislative affairs, that when you have issues like this, you're much more effective since it's football season if you're game tackling instead of going one-on-one tackling.
Yeah.
So, you know, as many multifaceted fronts as we can do with this is really exciting, and coordinating our efforts and programs and having a solid and a very concise legislative agenda, I think, is helpful. But also, you know, my question would be to the group is are there other organizations that are interested in transportation that when they meet with legislators can bring this up as well? You know, there's a lot of groups up there. For instance, I'll just throw this out, the American Institute of Architects is a regional chapter here that has Hope, Pinellas, Hillsborough, and 4 other counties that we represent. And so when we meet with the delegations, our organization is very interested in the transportation options that are available. And can we look at ways that we can partner with some of these organizations when they're looking at strategic things in terms of legislation that's good for our area as a whole, that we can use to also bring that message across, because we're talking to the same people about the same things. We're from the same area. So that's just something I want to throw out there, you know, if there's any interest in that, and how do we start to facilitate that with organizations like that are truly supportive of the kinds of things we're trying to do, because this does benefit the community as a whole.
I agree with that.
Oh, thank you very much, and welcome everybody. And I just wanted to add, as the chair of our legislative committee at PSTA, we are really excited about this year. We got started much earlier. We've done a lot of work looking at the progress of our work the last couple of years. We've been listening to, taking a lot of feedback from our board members and elected officials and members of the community, and are very excited about working with you, taking up a more strategic approach, working closer with NPO, working with our community groups. And one of my committee members on the legislative committee said recently that in the past when we went to Tallahassee, it felt like we were taking one gun and one bullet. And this time I feel like we are really going up there much more strategic, much more prepared and organized. A lot more detail available for people who want that level of detail about our priorities, which you'll see reflected in this packet. So I just wanted to say that I'm really proud of the work that we've done that has got us here, and I'm excited about the next few months. I also had the same question that Commissioner Jarosh had in terms of not wanting to have too muddy of a sense of what exactly the other groups are working on. But I just want to say that you really can't underestimate the value of us meeting on a quarterly basis, sharing information, figuring out where we can coordinate when we need to, and maybe in some cases it doesn't make sense to coordinate, but we know that better because we're communicating, and that's clearly what some of our elected officials want to see.
And if I could, you know, one of the great values is that this is something that has not happened in the past when we've been on there. You've been on PSTA long enough also to know that we really weren't talking to each other, not because we had any kind of animosity or, you know, some kind of bad relationship, but it had more to do with we were so busy doing our own thing that we didn't come together on some of these issues. I think one of the great values that we bring is that having this kind of collaboration and talking will always make us more important in the legislature. Because frankly, we don't have, you know, we don't have a strong legislative delegation in terms of leadership roles. There's a few folks that are involved in leadership, but not as many as we've seen in the past. You know, we were fortunate when Will Weatherford was the speaker because he did kind of reflect what was going on in the Tampa Bay area. But ever since he left, we have not had that really strong presence. Hopefully, when Speaker Designate Corcoran comes on board, you know, he'll look to the South and see that, you know, we're cooperating and hopefully help us in the House. and hopefully we'll have the same kind of heart in the Senate, because we really need to have the legislature on board with us from both sides of the Bay, regardless of what our legislative priorities are together, because we haven't seen that in the past. So I'm glad that we have great staffs that work together very, very well.
If I may add real quickly, and let's not forget about the federal picture either,
Sure.
because when it comes to the MAP 21 federal allocations for transit, we're in the same situation.
Yeah. I didn't want to muddy it up even worse, because who knows what's going on in Congress, okay?
Okay, well.
Question.
Just a map 21.
Let me recognize myself for a moment and ask a couple questions. Have we considered actually going up to Tallahassee together to do a joint? So that I think would be really powerful if we both appeared in their office up there at the same time.
And I believe we may even be looking at that on the federal side. That was a recommendation from Holland and Knight, our federal
Great.
group.
Okay.
We usually go up separate from the APTA meetings, because those are big group meetings, and you have
Right.
35 people tramping through an office. This year, the APTA meeting was scheduled during the House's spring break, so it wasn't a very useful trip for the folks who went on that,
Right.
but the separate visits were. So we had talked about trying to identify a time, and I know Holland and Knight is looking at what they could line us up with various delegations, and they'll be in touch. So not just to Tallahassee, up to D.C. as well.
But we're scheduled to go in October, right, Brad?
19.
Tallahassee.
DC, yeah.
To Washington.
Yeah.
See how quickly we
Yeah.
get on October 19th.
On the,
7th and 8th.
just continue on that legislative agenda, on the page 18 and 19, with the calendar there, you can see there is a suggested time that we would go to Tallahassee together to present at one of the committee weeks. After we speak to the legislative delegations together on our joint projects and then our separate projects, then we would go to Tallahassee together, kind of in the same way. And then, as Catherine said, same thing in D.C., that we would probably maybe even have our own meetings, like we're planning to go in October.
October 6th or 8th.
To speak to our legislative delegation on our federal projects, but then my goal is in the springtime to have a joint time that we might be able to go together. Also, I'm the incoming chair of the Florida Public Transit Association, and I've talked with their executive director about, they usually go to D.C. as well. They also go to Tallahassee. We're having our first transit day in Tallahassee ever, I think. It's going to be piggybacking on top of a long-standing Transportation Disadvantage Day, which I think is January 18th or 19th, around in there. But, to try to tap our sort of transit brethren across the state as well. So, it's a very aggressive timeline, as you can see there. And I think somewhere in the packet is a federal timeline as well. But all the opportunities we can to kind of go together and sort of support each other, the better.
The other question I had was, yes, this is a joint meeting between HART and PSTA, but what about PASCO? Do we have some advantage in sharing legislators?
We hope that we do. Pasco County has a new director of transit, and I think he's been in the job, but we're talking weeks instead of months.
Okay.
And Jeff reached out recently because we're all in the Tabarda TMA committee together. So
Okay.
if we have a speaker that we can grab, we're definitely looking at doing that. So Jeff is working through that. Again, the person is new, and we are it. Remember, PSTA and HART, we're it in the Bay that are standalone. So in dealing with Pasco, somebody somewhere in the county hierarchy, so making sure that request doesn't upset their county apple cart. But we are working with them for that Pasco person to do the request to go meet with Speaker Corcoran as opposed to the chairman making the direct request about it being in Pasco County. But that's the benefit of this regional project is it's Pasco Pinellas, it's everyone. So it gives us an opportunity to leverage in ways we wouldn't previously have.
And they're part of the TMA.
Yes.
So
Yes.
if we hold somebody from that group, Commissioner Starkey, for instance.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Could I just interject? It might be good to have someone like that address the PASCO legislative delegation as well on this regional thing, because it is going to impact 7 counties. You know, we may even want to see about expanding that reach, even have more voices.
Well, to piggyback on that, I mean, I think T-BARTA might be a good location to get that regional flavor, because that's what they're supposed to be doing. I'm on that board, but there's also members from all the other counties that surround us. And I know that there's been several discussions about what Citrus is doing in terms of their transit, in addition to PASCO, in addition to, I guess it's SCAT and MCAT Manatee, and SCAT in Sarasota. Did I get those right?
I think you did.
I think I did. Look at that. I do read my background material. Anyway, so there may be some value to talking to them also about doing that, because the more legislators that hear about what we're doing on a regional basis, even as far afield as Citrus, Manatee, and Sarasota, I think helps for in the long run, and that's, I think, what T-BARTA's purpose is anyway. So maybe we can just reach out to them, and of course Ray is over here, who's the executive director of T-BARTA. We can talk to him, and now that he knows that we're talking about him, maybe find a way that we can coordinate that. And then in terms of the Washington, D.C. trips, I just wanted to mention, and Bill, you may already know this, but you know, the APTA conferences for Washington, D.C., the fly-ins that they have are exactly the same time as the League of Cities, National League of Cities events. I know Darden knows that because she was at one event and then came over to League of Cities and went back. And so we may be able to coordinate that for all of us when we're going to D.C. Instead of making 2 trips on taxpayer dollars, maybe we can make only 1 trip and make it a little bit easier. That's just a suggestion. I think the Association of Counties comes either the week before or the week after that we're there, if I'm not mistaken. It has to be before.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if we might go back to the first item on page 8 is a listing of the sort of action items or the discussion items that we came up with at the last meeting. And I don't know if you want to take a look at that, ask me questions about where we are with that. I think this HART summary is pretty good as far as where we are with it.
What page is it on?
8 on the packet that was just handed out.
Commissioner Webb?
Well, going back to Mr. Jacobs' comment about bringing in other groups who are interested, I'm impressed that Ray Robinson has already tweeted this meeting. Very, very nice job. Did we ever do that joint press release that's one of the bullets on here? And the point
did.
is,
Go ahead.
whether it's social media or press release or whatever, we need to be getting the information out to the entire community about what we're doing. So I think that's very timely. Even this meeting ought to be out there in Twitterverse now. You know, the press release, I think, was something very important in that last meeting. That's a quick, easy thing to do.
Yeah, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, that we did work very successfully together and with Congressman Jolly on a letter supporting additional bus funding, that Congress would support additional bus funding that Congressman Jolly sort of spearheaded, but it was signed by the entire federal delegation from the Tampa Bay, 5 or 6 congressional members, and that was a great success. It's now being copied across the United States as a model, and I don't see my folks, but I'm pretty sure we issued a press release on that.
Okay.
A joint release on that. But no doubt, I mean, the whole key to this is getting the message out to the community, to the legislators that are interested in seeing a regional partnership, and then to the community, because I think, generally it looks good.
So we plan to do that on a regular basis?
Yeah.
Okay. Can I ask a question just going back to the priorities? Catherine, you mentioned 3 different buckets that those projects were coming from. Central Avenue, is that FDOT funding?
As I understand, the strategy from PSTA was to look for FDOT-specific funding funding program
Yes,
in the
right.
DOT budget.
And then the Clearwater Beach to TIA.
It's service planning grants, which are essentially everything between counties throughout the state. In almost every case, is funding by service planning. So all the routes between Pinellas and Hillsborough, for instance, are currently funded by service planning grants. I understand that PSTA already has a certain amount earmarked in the service planning grant program.
Who's the funder?
The DOT program.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And you've got money there, just not enough to cover a broader schedule.
Okay, and the regional revenue collection, was that general fund?
Yes, sir, general fund request.
Thank you.
And to refresh, we have some BARTA money in that program, and we've received FDOT intermodal funding. I believe that both entities have said in our outline year capital programs that we would allocate a certain amount of money. Of course, the more money that comes into fund, the less we have to put in. I'm sure we can definitely use our capital on buses, some other stuff. So while we've made that commitment, if we can get more support for the regional program, then we can keep that capital on programs where it is a little more impactful.
Thank you.
Did you want to go through this list to highlight things, or?
I think it speaks for itself. I know that the item below the press release about looking at Uber-type technologies, I'm not sure. I think that is one of the sort of priorities that's being talked about with HART. It's not a specific priority for on PSTA's legislative agenda, but it's something we're pursuing. As the board knows, I also had a meeting with Senator Brandis and Uber officials to try to see how they could be an alternative for areas of the county where we don't have very good service or we're discontinuing service. And that's a sort of a format of first mile, last mile, I think.
Could you give us an update as to what you're doing there? You're apparently doing something. I'm not very familiar with what's pending there.
Well, slightly different, physical configuration, right? So we've got 1,100 square miles. We can't cover it. Our paratransit buffer is about the same size as Pinellas, but that means we're covering about 250 square miles within 3/4 of a mile. So we have a lot of our county that doesn't have service, and we have a lot of folks who, when their bus stops running, they're still making a pretty lengthy trip. Add on top of that, I'm sure our costs are pretty comparable. Our incremental cost, so what we pay an hour about for a bus is $60 an hour. When we have 20, 30 people on that bus, that's great. In fact, our average passengers per trip is about 24, so that works out nicely for us. But late at night, at 11 o'clock, we have 10 routes to make their last trip after midnight, for instance, on the weekday, and they're pulling out of the yard at 4 in the morning. For folks who need to travel at the end or the beginning of the day, we have an empty bus, it's $60. 1 or 2 people are riding it, but it's an insurance policy, and the best example I have, it's very, very kind of cutesy. It's like going to Target at 9 o'clock at night. I never go to Target at 9 o'clock at night. I go at 8, 9 o'clock is my insurance policy. And if they closed at 9, I would never go at 8. I'd have to go at 7. Same thing with transit. So our challenge was, how do we keep investing transit where it makes the most sense, $60 an hour, but preserve the insurance policy on the weekends or the shoulders? And we, oddly enough, had someone who worked for us, our planning director, who went to work for Lyft. He was bored. He says Breaking Bad went off the air. It's a story. I think with him, I believe it. So he went to Lyft for a few months, and he came back and he said, here's what I'm seeing. Here's my observations. We will never do this better than they're doing it. Let's find a way to leverage that. So that led to these conversations. So we've also spoken to Uber. We've spoken to Lyft. We have spoken to Transdev, First Transit, MB, a lot of transit providers. Metro B was where it started last year. Said, hey, who's out there doing this? Because, the top, I just made this point to Caitlin from the Times, the top 30 markets, the Atlantas and the Seattles, they're big. They're saturated with options. But what about 31 to 150? What's out there for us? So HART has really been trying to position ourselves as a test market to say, come try something out here that can work, the line if it plays in Peoria type of thing. There's a lot of opportunities to deliver these innovative solutions, and we might not have millions of people a day, but any trip a day is money that vendor's not making. So let them continue to do what they do well. We nail the 40-foot and 30-foot bus market. People tell us all the time, though, and you've heard this ad nauseum, Vicki, people want transit, but they don't want a bus. That's what we hear in our county. So it could be coming. at least they're honest. But could we come up with something that was attractive and more cost-effective? So where we are is we're finding a statement of work, and I have to give a lot of credit to our planning group, because they keep saying, no, I want this, no, I want that, and they're absorbing, they're doing a lot of homework. We will have a solicitation out in September, might be September 30th at 4:59, but next month, we'll have a solicitation out there for first mile, last mile. And the goal is to have something where a HART patron either shows his or her pass or pays a flat fare. Our most expensive fare is $3, and that gets somebody into a rideshare style shuttle. They'll have to book in advance, probably a half-hour notice. Their trip will only be 3 miles. It'll be constrained to transit hubs because, again, we're trying to connect you from the end of the network. But instead of waiting for the big bus, you have this much more customized solution. We are putting in the statement of work that we're looking for something which can be smartphone-driven. Now, we still have our Title VI. We still have our ADA responsibilities. So even if we have a really groovy smartphone app, we still have to have a way for folks to call up and book a trip. We don't know how the Ubers and Lyfts can deal with that. And there is a requirement that the service be accessible. So while we know in paratransit about 20% of our folks need mobility devices, that still needs to be an option which is out there. The Yellow Cab app, for instance, hits all of this, but we don't know if they would be interested. So we're going out there. We have a fantastic procurement team. Lots of credit to them. In fact, they're working too hard to be here to hear me brag on them. So we'll have them stream. When the FTA was at our triennial, they gave us very strong marks for procurement. What we're going to take out will be very well structured but flexible. We want to leave it where we're saying, here's a zone where we think this works, and Brandon is where we're starting. But we want to leave it to these vendors to say, give us 1 or 2 other candidates, tell us how you would meet this need so we can be flexible and make sure that we're getting something out there that meets our business needs. But it can also be driven by what these private providers think they have the ability to demonstrate. So by the time we meet again, hopefully we will have that at least on the street, which puts us in the window of silence. We can't talk too much. And we don't know exactly how it's going to work. It ideally is a great solution. It could be less than perfect, but if we don't try, we don't know. And we've just got too many trips that we can't reach. We have to try something.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add on to that. This is an example, I think, of what I'm really excited about. What's going on here right now is we're starting to think way beyond where we've been thinking before in terms of providing options for this community, and nobody can criticize us for not being aggressive in terms of looking for those options, because if this community, as an architect and as a citizen member of this, as a business person, in order for us to stay competitive, we have to look at these options, and we have to have our planning folks like Ray and all of us who work together here, the elected officials and the citizens, looking for these options that it gives our community the kinds of choices that we have to be able to stay competitive. That's what's so exciting about this. We can get down into the details, and that's all going to be fun, but putting this together right now, working together to do this, I can't express the importance and the excitement that I feel, and I think the community will feel, because just by tweeting this stuff out and reaching into that network, and people start to retweet this, and it goes deeper and deeper into the community, and the stronger the network we build, the stronger that message gets out there. And I think that's what's more important, is that the message of what we're doing right now is starting to get out there. This is very exciting stuff. I can't tell you how thrilled I am and how we get moving forward on all of this, because we're doing stuff that's never been done before. And that is something showing our community that we're really out here working on behalf of what's best for our region.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At there was a Tampa Bay Partnership Transportation Forum a year or so ago, and I remember Catherine, because I quoted you, was on a panel with some of the ride-sharing companies, and I think Senator Brand said they do some things exceptionally well, and we do some things exceptionally well, and the key is working together. And it's great to see this coming to fruition. This is outstanding. First mile, last mile is an issue that we've been wrestling with forever in transit. What's your approach on the insurance?
Ooh, that's a great question, and thank you so much. So a few things. Remember, we are a state transportation agency, and we're specifically enabled in state code to do mass transportation. In Hillsborough County, you may be aware, we have our Public Transportation Commission, and they regulate for hire. We're not touching that lane. So that lane is like over a hill, across a bridge. We're staying within the definition of transportation. So we're not looking for the same insurance somebody would need if they, as a vendor, are responsible for driving up and getting their car checked out. I was explaining to Councilman Forrest earlier today, we'll use the same model we use for construction. So on a construction site, we don't go around when we're renovating our building and ask everybody there for their proof that they can work there, or where did you learn how to weld. We have the relationship with the vendor that the vendor assumes a responsibility for what they're going to deliver to us. And we set the insurance requirements, the background check requirements. It is a little different for us, unlike PSTA, where you have great experience contracting out on your paratransit. We don't do that. We did recently go out with a solicitation for cab-focused services for our folks on paratransit to pick up extra demand for us. So if somebody wants to come home from the grocery store, should they have to book that trip at the same time the day before and haggle? Or shouldn't it just pick up the phone and be able to get your groceries home? So we went on the street for that. We only had one responsive bidder. They said our insurance requirements were too high. So in working with the other bidders, we pulled it, and we're going to take the insurance to something that still covers us and covers our patrons, but it's something that our local market has told us they can deal with. Now, having said that, I don't know if the individual rideshare companies will be willing to bid on something where they are like a traditional contractor, because they always say they're not. I don't know that they will come in and say, okay, we're going to take responsibility that everybody's got X, Y, Z, but they've got the opportunity to partner with the Transdevs and the MDs and the big, the big providers out there, so somebody else can figure that out. That sounds terrible. It's an interesting thing for us. Normally we just do the federally required background checks, which are the high level, the fingerprints, the substance abuse testing, the random substance abuse testing. There's no federal dollars wrapped up in this program, though, so then we have to balance out, is it worth the extra expense of this background check and the substance abuse testing, or is there something which passes muster that we can see with our partners in the state? And that's where we're settling. So we'll clearly have insurance. And another distinction, somebody has to meet our requirements to do business with us. It's not like we're chasing somebody down on the street who's providing a trip and bringing us a bill later, So we have a little more control over what we get in that way. Now that I was emphatic.
Commissioner Rhodes?
Thank you, Chairman. And I just also wanted to acknowledge that we have another PSTA board member here, Commissioner Patty Johnson in the red. And I actually wanted to bring forth an issue that she has brought to our attention since our last joint meeting, and this may be something of mutual concern. But Commissioner Johnson brought to our attention that there is a Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged. And as you all know, PSTA is looking at fare restructuring and raising some fares, including for TD. And so it was really, we were taken aback to get an update. I believe it was from Senator Latvala, who said a representative from this Florida Commission testified to the governor that they were good on funds. And yeah, so I'm just repeating what I was told, but that seems like that seems like a potential area where together we could work to better inform and work with this Florida Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged, which honestly I didn't even know existed.
Thank you. I think it's really important to all of us involved, because it's all part of our development, and most certainly it's a big part of our population in the area of the people that we serve, and it's part of our.
Do you participate in the transportation disadvantage?
I believe HART is, if not the only transit agency, we might be one of the only ones in the state where the transit agency is not also the TD provider. So in Hillsborough County Sunshine Line. So we are a little separate, but we still can partner to make sure we're getting the message out, because, clearly we need to know our reality. Is there are folks who take HART Plus if they can't get their Medicaid trip or their Sunshine Line trip. So our folks are in there, but we work very closely with the county. Our staff is always at the TD board. We, in fact, had talked about folding our ADA committee in with our TD board in the county. Our committee didn't like that. They wanted to keep a separate voice, but we do work very, very closely.
I was the appointee from PSTA to our local coordinating board before Commissioner Johnson was, and I did participate in the annual TD conference and went up at least for one Tallahassee trip, and I understand that that's going to be with the Florida Transit Association, so that would be helpful. But it's really an incredible story that we heard about the committee meeting where the state representative of the PD program said, no, there's plenty of money here. Hello,
Interesting, any public entity said they had enough money.
And they have a different personal agenda. So, did that complete your question?
Thank you.
Vice Chairman Bushowski, you have a
Well,
question?
I'll follow up on that too. Is it your MPO that oversees that, or your transportation board that oversees?
The TD board, right, and I'm referring, so behind us is Ruthie Reyes-Burkhardt, our COO, and she had been up in the customer service in the paratransit area before coming into Van as COO. So any information how that functions, it's a separate TD board that oversees that, correct, Ruthie?
Correct. The TD board, the Transportation Disadvantage Coordinating Board for Hillsborough County provides the oversight to the provider, the CPC, the local, which is Sunshine Law.
Who do they report to?
The MPO.
That's what I was,
And
so it
Board
is
of
under the
County
MPO. Our TD was also under MPO, and we took it over a couple of years ago because we were providing the DART, even though we contracted it out. And it was part of the way to keep all of it together and make it more efficient. Running DART, paratransit, and TD all together could be the same fee structure, not same fee structure, but same, reviewing your income. And, there was efficiency in putting all of that together. So that's why I was curious. But I raised my hand earlier, just going back to the first mile, last mile. Maybe this is more of a question for Brad. You're not necessarily looking at Uber, you're looking at shuttle service for your first mile.
Correct.
last
We,
mile. Or anybody that responds to
Right.
it.
So, and the nice part about, our solicitation process is we'll put together the rules and anyone who has
Who wants to
responsive.
respond.
Right.
Okay. So I'd be curious, and you might not be able to answer this at this point, I'd just be curious to see what they're doing, what their RFP ends up looking like, and trying to understand how that might work for us.
Yeah, well.
I mean, we don't want to have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
Now, maybe it's a matter of us watching how it works for you, or maybe it's going and doing it at the same time. I don't know. And maybe it's not the same situation, given the fact that you have a broader scope of property to be covered. But I just thought it might be worthwhile. And I would say that what they're trying to do, isn't it sort of similar as our connector service?
Yes. Well, yes, it's very similar to what we already provide. We have a contract.
We're doing it ourselves, but I mean, isn't that sort of similar to what they're talking about as our connector service?
Yes, and quite frankly, it's almost exactly what we contract out to a taxi cab provider to provide the East Lake Connector cab service for able-bodied citizens, able-bodied folks, not DART, up in northern Pinellas County. We did that through a procurement, and the yellow cab comes and it connects people from East Lake to certain transit hubs. It's pretty similar. What I talked to Uber about, it's a little bit different, or at least the concept that Uber has is a little bit different than what going through an RFP process, in that they believe in Pinellas County, since we do not have the regulation that Hillsborough does, we're free to contract with them, or to provide them. They can send us a bill for Uber trips in a certain area, and then we can subsidize them so that they can provide them at a lower cost. That is possible in Pinellas County. Now, the board asked a whole bunch of great questions at our last meeting about insurance and background checks and competition. I've been right after the board meeting, I started getting inundated with emails from the cab companies telling me they also have apps and they would love to pick up people in East Lake too. So we might end up at the same spot as HART with a RFP kind of thing. I'll have more to report out in about a month.
Okay, thank you. And this is another place where the Regional Fair Initiative could help us out, because we're going to be stuck with how do we get money, how do they verify somebody as a passenger tying into the network? We have smart cards. We could open up the ability to say, the vendor is doing a pass-through on a database. And so when somebody is coming in to book a trip, it's tied to their card they already have, so you know it's the patron that is written. And in our conversations with Lyft, they've done some creative solutions in the Silicon Valley area, but they start with a smarter fare collection system than we have. So another opportunity where this can be beneficial to both agencies and the whole region.
And Chair, if I may, one of the things that we keep emphasizing at HART is that all mobility choices are important to us, meaning that we may run the bus company, and as Catherine mentioned, we may do something really, really, really well, but we don't do everything really, really, really well. So when we talk about Uber or Lyft or any other, even the cab companies, we're not talking about squeezing them out in any way. We're talking about making it part of a fabric and a mosaic in order to make sure that we can get people to where they want to go in a timely manner and the way they want to go. So one of the things that I've reached out to and have had conversations with is Zipcar, and finding ways that we might be able to partner with them so that you can be a regular a regular user of transit, but at the same time have that availability and that access to small, short-term car rental so that you don't have to worry about it. We're actually right now talking with some of our downtown condo associations to find out how can we have a Zipcar located within their facilities. That's a little bit of a contractual issue that we need to deal with, and it's kind of tough, but we're looking at how do we disperse these. I discovered that we only had 2 Zipcars in the city of Tampa. Both of them were at the Marriott right by corner of Cypress and West Shore, and they were servicing those people that were pilots or stewards and stewardesses that were flying in. They would stay there and they would have a car available in order to go to beaches in Pinellas or to go shopping in different parts of the city or go visit other places in downtown Tampa. So,
can you explain what a Zipcar is?
A Zipcar is a short-term rental. It started in Boston. It became you get a card. It's a membership. You touch the card on the side of the car. It opens up the car. It has a gas card in it. It has the keys in it. All you have to do is you check it out, you're gone. You take it, bring it back to where it was at, and then you rented the car for the day. Depending on what form you have, it could be as low as $7 a day to rent a car based on a membership. So it's a great way to get around.
I am one.
Seriously. That's good one too. They're very popular.
And that would be a great solution for a lot of things that happen in Pinellas County, where if you fly in and you make a decision to ride the Jolly Trolley up and down the beaches, but you want to have that availability for a Zipcar, it is a great way to go east and west as opposed to going north and south. So there's a lot of advantages to it. And to me, I always look at it as a very simple equation. Choice equals mobility. The more choices we have, the more mobility we have, the more we keep looking at all these different innovative ways of providing some type of transportation, the better off we're going to be. And I think this is what's good about all of us talking this out, because we talked about at T-BARTA about what we do with Bike Co-Share in our city. It would be a great partner to have along the beaches, especially in Pinellas County. Commissioner Justice was at that meeting, and of course we kept telling them that all they have to do is have the county pay for it, and he agreed to all that. So next commission meeting, you'll find that Charlie Justice is going to ask for millions of dollars for bikes.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Hope I didn't get him in trouble.
And before we go on the money side, and something else that we've been looking at is Megabus. So of course Megabus goes from Tampa and Orlando to Miami, and that's super busy. Those operators all live in Orlando, so going back to Jeff, who's hiding behind people again, Jeff was talking to Megabus on a lead that came up from Justin Day at the advocacy group. So starting October 1st, I believe, if all our paperwork is correct, October 1st. So we've got our first thing to brag about for next year. Every trip of Megabus between Orlando and Tampa will stop in East County at the Burnett Park and Ride, and somebody can show their HART Express pass or spend $3 online with Megabus and buy a pass and get into Tampa. And I anticipate $3?
So 3 times.
3 times. It's 3 times a day plus Saturdays and Sundays, a connection that doesn't exist. We don't have the vehicles. We would have not had this on our list of things to get to for a long, long time, but since we're buying capacity on an existing service out there, I think that we're going to start this on a Thursday? And by Monday, we're going to be getting eaten up from our other passengers saying, where's my double-decker bus with Wi-Fi? But it's looking...
Does it come to Pinellas?
We will work on them about that, because they only come to Tampa, so the next step is to try to get them to the airport and then to Pinellas.
But the other thought, if I might, is I wonder if that idea would work with Amtrak. Because if you want to take the Amtrak, I know this because we took our grandkids to D.C. a couple of summers ago, and I thought we were getting a train right in Tampa, but you had to get on a bus here and go all the way to Orlando. But the interesting thing is, coming back, we went all the way into Tampa, and then we had to get on a bus and come to Pinellas. So I wonder if that would work, because I am telling you what, it was standing room only on that bus. If they could have put people standing there. And the one thing that I loved about taking the train, it leaves on time, it gets there on time. It's unbelievable.
We'll talk to our...
But I mean, that's just another example of how we might be able to partner. But the other question, bigger question that I had that I'm always curious about, when you and Brad go to those national, whatever they are, association meetings or conventions or whatever, do they talk about what the public transit options for the future are going to be, like the driverless cars and things zipping through the air and, you know, like the well, I mean, you laugh, but
it depends on the concept.
I recently saw, you know, in other parts of the world, they do move people on gondolas, and they move like every 18, what is it, 18, could that be possible? Every 18 seconds there's one going. They're coming and going like this. Do you know what I mean?
Cable cars.
Yeah, kind of. But they're not like in a mountain. They're, I mean, could you just imagine if you could take a cable car from Tampa International across the Howard Franklin and out to Clearwater Beach? How fun would that be?
I would like to go to the conference in Milan that's talking about that. Yeah, it's
and in South America, they have it.
It wouldn't be as much fun during
And they have it in
hurricane season,
Spain.
but I think it
And
would
they
be
have it in
pretty
Spain,
interesting.
and there's some places in the Pacific Rim where they have that kind of technology. I mean, why aren't we talking about stuff like that? I just think it's so fun.
Well, I will say, and Commissioner, I'll point out some about Megabus that she didn't. Megabus pays us to have the location at our Marion Street Transit Center. So we have a contract with them, so not only are they helping us out with this transit, but they also pay us when they come into our transit center.
You mean it's a revenue stream?
Yeah.
Brad.
Yeah.
Hello.
We are actually seeing, I will just say, I've talked to operators of our express bus that goes over to the Marion Street Transit Center, and they've seen we have seen an increase in ridership in the midday. We have one midday trip from Pinellas over there, and I guess the Megabus leaves around midday.
Yeah.
And people are riding our bus over to and paying us $3, and then paying $1. Right. They can get to Orlando from Pinellas for $4.
I've done
Yeah.
You can't drive there.
That's right.
For that.
Yeah.
I mean, Wi-Fi and tweet the whole time, and I want to say Megabus is $15,000 a year for 5 years, and we're reinvesting that in Marion. So next time, because we're all in downtown Tampa all the time, go look at the landscaping. Our landscaping crews now have the money to spend. We have fronted it all up, so we've overhauled our downtown. It looks so great. We even made the bougainvillea come back, which I didn't know you could do that.
Well, there's also Red Coach, too.
Yes, Red
Red
Coach.
Coach, yeah.
And Red Coach starts at the airport.
Yeah.
So it's a handful of trips coming airport. Red Coach also goes through Tampa, and that's if you have kids in college and you don't know about Red Coach, go Google it. So it hits all the college campuses, so it does Gainesville, does Tallahassee.
Does it go to the football games?
Does it go to the football games, Jeff? I don't know.
It goes to the campuses that have the best football teams, and that would be Gainesville.
All this goodwill down the drain.
We never liked that guy anyway. Don't worry about it.
I'm not sure, but I mean, it's redcoach.com. It's a company. A family moved from Venezuela, came to the U.S. They were in Miami, said it was so hard to get around, so they started their own bus company. And they buy charter buses. They buy them after a couple of years. And so they've got, I get the leather, and they're very cushy. And for people who the choice is pay the kids note and pay the kids car insurance and pay for parking or stick them on a bus, it's turned out to be extremely popular.
But I mean, it's really a safe way for the students to get back and forth to all these games they want to go to and drag their grandparents with them.
We'll look at the schedule.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be good.
Well, and the nice thing about Red Coach too, if it did come from the airport, is it has the capability for luggage. You know, so
Yeah.
of course our
Megabus.
and Megabus as well, yeah. So that our transit buses obviously couldn't, offer. So it's a win-win.
And along those lines, we here down, we've got the researching ways to connect to the airport, so the second and third bullets. We do have planned for 2016, 2017, especially on the Hillsborough side, part of the Go Hillsborough component is 2017, implementing a route that would go down Mountain Tampa, Airport, Carillon, St. Pete.
Don't forget the pie.
Yes, ma'am. We're going to
Airport.
slowly doing the study and the work on that in the next year, and trying to consolidate, because we've got this route, we've got that route, we've got several routes the state is paying for, so the intent is to pull it all together to where it's most impactful, and you can run the frequency that folks will actually use. So it's not just 2 trips here, 2 trips there. So we'll continue to pursue that from a planning perspective.
So this conversation leads me to think that maybe there might be an opportunity to have this kind of dialogue with our state and federal elected officials to just further enhance the way in which we collaborate.
We certainly can report on this discussion,
Yeah.
but Commissioner Jacob has been trying to say something.
I'm so sorry I jumped in.
No, this is great. This is the kind of discussion we should be doing when we get together. I mean, we're talking about options, we're talking about new ideas, and I want to bring it to you. This is an economic development problem we're dealing with.
Yeah.
And think about, I have to deal with parking ratios every day when we're doing a project. First thing I got to do is go to the city and make sure I meet the parking ratio for the county. And it's hard because of what we have to do here. But what if we had a zip car program or a first mile, last mile program with, a transportation card for somebody? What if that was automatically paid for when you got a unit somewhere or you bought a house on the route, and suddenly you have zip car available to you, have all the transportation modes available to you, and if a developer tried to do that, maybe we decline their parking ratio by 50%. Think about what that does to the ability to a deal, because at $20,000 to $25,000 per parking spot that we're budgeting right now to construct it, you could invest a small amount of that money to get that done, and that money can be reinvested somewhere else with things. And then suddenly, if somebody moves in and they don't have to have an additional vehicle with the insurance and the cost of a vehicle, this is now all economic development. This is money that can be spent in other ways in our community in a more positive way than it is now. So when we look at it, for the ultimate cost of doing this and the cost savings for everybody involved, not just us as the providers, but the users, with the ability of that, now we've got something that really generates, I would think, a lot of interest and a lot of energy in this, because we're doing something that really hasn't been done before, and we're thinking about it from an economic standpoint of everybody, not just transportation and mobility, but this affects your bottom line. You can use more with your money that you bring home. And that's where these are the ideas I think I'm real excited about, that we can start to look at and talk about.
That's possibly a concept in the discussions that we have with Mr. Blanton on some of the moving forward long-term strategies. Smith, or Vice Chair?
I agree with everything you've just said. It's something I know we're looking at in downtown Denver. We have limited area to park. But having said all of that, all of these newer transit options really speak to the millennials coming up.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to get on a bus. The idea of a bus is very cliche and old hat to them. That's just like my niece and nephew. They've been doing Uber for the last 3 or 4 years. I mean, they know more about it than I do, and I sit in the transit world. So I think it's really incumbent upon us as this new generation is coming up that we do invest in these new options. We look at them and we keep them as simple app type thing that can cover all of the gamut. Zip car, all of that stuff, because they're our next generation coming in. They're the people that will be paying for it going forward. And to communicate with them is not like how we communicate with our public today. It's all social media. Also, they do not watch us on TV. They don't read the paper. They read their phone. That's it.
Yeah.
So I just put that out there. Yes, I do. I love the trolley in our county.
Just a quick comment, because I totally agree. I think I use Uber when I go to DC. I mean, it's point-to-point. It's a lot, our point-to-point service is the closest we have is our HART Plus service, and, that's costing us over $30, per trip. But you also, I think Commissioner Long mentioned autonomous vehicles, and why I think that's a long way away. I don't think it's that long away, because I know even FDOT is looking at the possibility of having an autonomous vehicle lane perhaps over the bridge, because you can, because you eliminate operator error, you can, what do they call that, where they pilot them or platoon them, where they can go at very fast distances.
But they've got a 5-year window they're looking at.
Yeah, so
I mean,
it's not
so
as
you think it's far away, but
far
it's
off. And those types of technologies could also then help alleviate some of those parking issues, because if you have an autonomous vehicle, it'll go get itself another ride, a paid-for ride, and you don't really need to park it
Because
at
it's not
that point.
parking, and the Atlantic had something that they tweeted out last week, the week before, that something like 60% of the traffic in major metro areas are cars circulating looking for parking.
Yeah.
So imagine if you just take that off the road.
So I think technology is really going to advance and solve a lot of these problems too. So as long as we just keep nimble and flexible to be able to accommodate that technology, that probably isn't as far along as we think coming down the line.
But it's important to keep that conversation going
Right.
in our strategic plans.
Yes.
They aren't done and written in stone. They're moving, living documents.
Sure.
One of the, I love these conversations, brainstorming, or just kind of rolling from one subject to the other, and I find it very interesting. One of the things that we're doing, this is more pedantic, is that the word, that we're trying to come up with a way to communicate more with our bus riders and with our potential riders as to just how do you ride a bus, how do you pay for the fare, how do you determine when it's coming, and it seems like that might be an opportunity to do jointly through some of the regional media, either through the newspapers that serve both sides of the bay, or the regional newspapers, or the TV, and some local coverage on some of the public service type programs. And I would just like to throw that out as a potential, as part of I assume that's kind of part of your agenda as well, but it might be something that we could do together.
Yeah.
And it would also have the optics of this is a regional initiative, which means do it jointly with PSTA.
I think it's an excellent suggestion. We've started moving around where that is on our website, but our marketing folks and our PIO have been getting together saying, hey, we need to fresh it up, we need to come up instead of I think we have a 5-minute video of how to ride, and it's Gasparilla saying come up with 15-second little blurbs to make it easier and help people figure that out. So we'll be working on that, and we'll work more closely.
If I may?
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, and that's a great example. I think one of the things we probably ought to look at doing is telling our story better than we tell it now, and telling it in a means by which it can go out through social media, video. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that use our transportation system, and they have a story to tell because it works for them. And how do we tell that story out there to more people? Because of the perception you talked about exactly, Commissioner, with the millennials in particular. But
It has to be a funny video. I'll tell you, my
it has to be
son
interesting.
watches on YouTube now. He's 17 years old, but but it's not.
And
Talking
short.
to millennials, you're only talking about 10 years older than he is, really, and they're gonna watch that kind of thing. We have to get creative.
we have to change a culture.
Yes.
And I mean, that's our biggest challenge, I think, in this community, is how do we change the culture and the perception of what the transportation system is. But certainly telling stories of people that use it successfully, and all kinds of people, you know, like the people, the young millennials that work in my office,
Right.
we have some that choose public transportation, and they use their bicycle with it. I just saw that, your photo, and it just kind of brought it to mind. So these are the kinds of things I would love to investigate. How do we tell that story in a way that somebody can sit here and tweet that out, or we can attach a video or something like that that tells these wonderful stories, because there's a lot of great people out there that benefit from this, and it's a great story to tell.
Right. Chairman, do you have anything else that you'd like to add here?
Oh, no, I've talked enough as it is.
Mr. Miller or Ms. Egan? Anything else here? Have we completed our agenda? We've kind of wandered into other business. We said we were going to do these meetings quarterly. I would certainly like to have us continue that process. I don't know if I think we talked maybe about having a consolidated meeting, but maybe we can do what we've done today, and just invited our board members to attend, and certainly invite comments from, I don't know if you have anything else to add. So our next step would be for the two of you to schedule. I don't think we're scheduled for a next quarterly meeting yet.
Probably January, we can best think about it. We're almost in September now, and then December, there's no way.
It's crazy.
No way. I couldn't have one more thing in the month of December, so.
We know.
So if there's no other business, I guess we can do adjournment.
When are we meeting again? Did we decide?
January.
January.
Oh, sometime in January.
Lena and Rich will start the polling. Probably take until January to get it scheduled.
Since I won't be here in January, as I roll off as the previous chair, I just want to say this is excellent. It's a major step forward. So impressed with the progress we've made working together over the last couple of years. So I'll probably just sit in without a board meeting back.
Please.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you for coming
Great.
over.
That's your. Oh, right.
You may not be.
All right, I'll take care of it.